What are the good cards in Arthurian Legends? Here's my take on the top 5 cards. Hey everyone, how's it going? This is Hank from Wizards Den. Today on Sorcery TCG News, I would like to give you my top 5 cards that I find really useful in Arthurian Legends. Many of you might not have built much decks using cards from Arthurian Legends, so I wanted to make a video on this so you think twice when you trade away some of these cards away. I'll give my top 5 cards for each of the 4 rarities, considering its card power and also on how generally it can be used across different decks. Because I did value general use, you'll realize that all of the multi-element cards are not included in the list. There are powerful multi-element cards, don't get me wrong, but currently it is useful in specific archetypes, mainly Templar decks, or to augment cards in specific elemental combinations, and this is the main reason it did not get included in the list. Just remember that there are lots of good multi-element cards, it's just that most of them are not general purpose cards with the potential to be added in many different decks. So let's start from the ordinary cards. Here is the ranking from top 1 to 5. Hydra Sprites comes in 5th place with its interesting Genesis ability to limit the use of opponents' cards. With the addition of Lookout, which is also a new card from Arthurian Legends, we have reliable methods to figure out what cards are in opponents' hands and call a card out, not totally relying on Swoop and Scout. As this is a Genesis ability, you can use it in Death Speaker decks. And as it's a fairy, it works well with Sylvan Splendor decks too. Grain Sparrow comes in 4th with its annoying ability to gain 2 life when it comes into play. Very useful in beast decks to keep you alive longer and give you a cheap blocker. And yes, it's a Genesis again, so goes into Death Speaker decks too. 3rd place goes to 2 spells, which is Duel and Joust. Basically an inferior version of Grapple Shot as the units fight instead of strike. Duel is slightly better as Joust may not work when there are movement restrictions. In some decks where you want a second version of Grapple Shot, like Battle Mage decks, this becomes another source of damage that can be utilized. It certainly works well with Knight decks that heavily use Lance, and also decks that don't use air elements as Grapple Shot would not be an option. Hamlet comes in 2nd with its powerful capability to reduce all ordinary minions' casting cost by 1. You can cast any of your 1-cost ordinary beasts for free. It is an ordinary restricted Donnybrook Inn, and it works very well with the beast and fairy decks that popped out with Arthurian Legends. I use it in my beast deck too, and it is one of the most abusable ordinary cards in this set. Finally, 1st place goes to Magic Missile, an air version of Firebolts. This spell fills in the spell gap that Air Element was missing. Air Element lacked the ability to give efficient small damage. They have good spells like Lightning Bolt, but it is a waste when you want to get rid of a bunch of foot soldiers on the ground. In order to do that, you needed to use Fire, but now you have a perfect spell to bridge that gap. This spell will definitely bring in more use of the air element, and I can guarantee that this card will become the most used ordinary card in Arthurian Legends. Next, let's go into the exceptionals, and here are the rankings. Annual Fair comes in 5th place with its unique element generating effect. When your deck relies on more than 3 elements while many of them consumes more than 2 thresholds, this does become in handy sometimes. There is also a small combo with Island Leviathan. When you have 4 water sites, one being Island Leviathan, you play Annual Fair and generate 4 more water elements to transform the Leviathan in turn 5. I think we finally have a good way to use that useless card thanks to this new addition. 4th place goes to Trollbridge, the new 2nd tier free city. Not only is it a great second option card for Free City, it has great synergies with various water cards, as many of the spells and effects pulls in units, such as Riptide, Unland Angler, and Maelstrom. It's also a great Root Spider deterrent, so I'm expecting this card to be used across different types of decks. Third place goes to Funeral Fire. To remove any cards from the cemetery, we only had Pillar of Xyris up till now. But that was a unique, and it was not a reliable source of cemetery removal, especially with increased Atlas deck size. Now we have something that can be used more reliably, and it is something we don't have to feel bitter when you have to place it on your first turn, which has always been the case for Pillar of Xyris. Not only is this good against Death Speaker, it is great against Archimago, the new avatar that can reuse magic spells in the cemetery. Second place goes to two cards, which is Saracen Raiders and Redcap Poweries, the two fire minions that have Charge. Charge is a powerful ability in Sorcery. It instantly deals damage and leaves behind a constant threat which the opponent have to deal with. The most used charge minion in the previous set was Petrosian Cavalry, and the two new cards are both comparable to this card. These two cards strengthens aggro decks, and I use them in my current deck too, which I am planning to do a deck on, by the way. These two will likely be the most used exceptional minions in Arthurian Legends. Finally, the first place goes to Beacon. The ability to generate extra mana when there are nearby enemies is huge. You now don't need to rely too much on towers where you have a risk of having a second copy. Beacons can typically work all the time reliably, and it is such a great sight to add into any decks. The best exceptional sight in Arthurian Legends. Now let's move into the elite cards. Horn of Kulion comes in 5th place with its ability to give charge to nearby minions. What makes a beast deck better? Well, obviously, beasts with charge. Swarm your enemies with supercharged beasts, not all of them can be blocked. Great card to be used for various weenie decks, and I can see this being used in different archetypes. 4th place goes to Wizard's Den, a site that allows you to draw a spell. The downside is the fact that it provides no elemental affinity, and that limits the type of decks it can be used in. Also, if the deck is already using various utility sites, it becomes a question of which cards to replace it with. But with decks that require absolutely as much spells as possible, this card is really useful, and I believe there will be more general use of this card in the foreseen future. Arcane Barrage comes in 3rd place with it being the first X-cost damage source. There's finally something to use the mana generated from Occult Ritual. Both fire and air lacked a reliable damage source that can deal damage beyond 4, which was one of the reasons why 5 power minions are really strong. Now we have an answer to these once you have enough mana. It requires 3 air thresholds, so it's not something easy to cast if your deck is not air heavy. But if it is, definitely useful, especially with Merlin's Tower or Archimago. 2nd place goes to Sylvan Splendor, the card drawing engine for beasts and fairies. Put this card down and dump all your 1-cost beasts, that's now a 0 cost due to Hamlet, and draw the same amount to do it again. The effect is crazy good, and it will be included in all Druid decks. It's an elite, so you don't get it often, but if you make it happen, it's hard to catch up with it. Finally, the 1st place goes to Valley of Delight. This card will definitely be the most used elite card in Arthurian Legends. With the larger Atlas deck size, it makes so much sense to add these to reliably generate elements with no negative side effects. A must-have card in Arthurian Legends. Okay, now with the uniques. Here's a ranking, and let's go from number 5, which is all the tri-element sites. The 4 sites that generate mana and threshold if it's in the back row. Essentially a downgraded second copy of the color out of space. Yes, it has its negatives, and you definitely do not want to play these in Pathfinder or Geomancer decks, but it does work well with most of the decks requiring multiple different thresholds. As the atlas size gets larger, you might want more multi-element sites to give you that extra stability. It does nothing else, so that is why it's in the 5th place, but nonetheless, it will be staples in many decks. 4th place goes to Four Waters of Paradise. It is essentially a mix that costs 1 extra mana but can work with all elements. As it was with a mix, this is great for decks that use various spells that cost more than 4 or 5 mana, but not really the kind of boost you need for spells that cost 1 or 2 mana. If your spell have a peak mana curve around 3, relying on towers or cores will likely be better. Now for a deck that works with mixes, it will be a great option as a 3rd copy of the mix. But whether you would like to have Four Waters or a Highland Princess instead will become a question, as the latter has much more use than just a simple mix. So it would certainly limit the use of Four Waters to decks that use spells with multiple threshold counts in different element types. But it will definitely have its use, considering there are many strong triple element spells in Arthurian Legends, and this certainly can aid the casting of these spells. 3rd place goes to Merlin's Tower. What a great place to summon your Grandmaster Wizard. The best part about Merlin's Tower is that it doesn't eat up your spellbook like Four Waters. You will have no game feeling bad because you pulled a mix in the late game when you never want them. This goes in any of the air element decks, and because air is the best support element in Sorcery, this card can go into almost any of the decks. In fact, all of the current decks I have built uses Merlin's Tower. By the way, the mana reduction is awesome without question, but becoming a spellcaster is also great for a source of any proximity spells. Now you have another way to kill those annoying root spiders. 2nd place goes to Morgana Le Fay, another great card to cast using Merlin's Tower, provided you have the elemental thresholds. Drawing 3 cards is huge, and stealth keeps it safe from spells and abilities. The triple threshold is quite high, but still rather easy to meet the requirements. Any fire decks can use this card effectively, and Morgana will be seen in many top meta decks for sure. Finally, the best unique card goes to the Ring of Morgan. Busted is a good word to describe it. The more you play with it, you will feel the power of the ring. Great in early games and in late games. It is certainly a staple in all decks, which is why it's so busted. It will be the top rated card in Arthurian Legends, without question. In the closing, I would like to give my opinion on the impression of Arthurian Legends when playing constructed formats. I think the set is very well balanced. Yes, the ring is slightly an anomaly, but other cards are really well designed with many interesting and powerful interactions. It really plays well with the alpha and beta cards, and I am fully enjoying the cards right now. Also, the deck size increase have no effect on playability or choosing enough cards. In fact, I still have problems trying to cut down on the deck size due to having so many selections. Also, just as a note, there are many more unique cards that didn't go on the list but are powerful cards like Fields of Camlan, Merlin, Lady Iseult, and Feast for Crows. You just need to play with it to figure out if they are good. So before you make any judgment on whether the card is good or bad, or claiming there's no hits in this set, try making a deck. Arthurian Legends cards make your mind twist, and I am pretty sure you will be greatly entertained by how much depth it adds to the play. So, that's it for today's episode. If you like this episode, please give it a thumbs up, and subscribe to the channel for future episodes regarding sorcery. Thanks for watching, and until next time, have a great game.